acting up on Capitol Hill. And the Department of Homeland Security said Friday it plans to enter into new agreements with 67 state and local enforcement agencies. These agreements expand the existing 287G program, which delegates some federal immigration enforcement authority to certain state and local agencies. The announcement comes shortly after DHS released a report on immigrant detention, noting the vast majority of those detained under the 287G agreements were never charged with a criminal offense. The 287G program has come under intense criticism in recent months from over 500 organizations, including the ACLU, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, calling on the government to end the program. Many of the agencies involved have been accused of racial profiling, and the Maricopa County Sheriff, Joe Arpaio, in Phoenix, Arizona, is being investigated by the Justice Department. On Friday, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, known as ICE, said it would go forward with new jails agreement with Sheriff Arpaio, but remove his field authority to enforce federal immigration laws on the street. Well, that didn't stop the sheriff, and he conducted his 12th so-called immigration sweep Friday, arresting some 60 people. The sheriff defended his stance on Fox's Glenn Beck show earlier this week.
You know what? They can take away anything they want. I'm still the elected sheriff. I'm still going to enforce the state laws, and I'm going to enforce the federal laws. There is a law, which they probably don't know about, that locals, local law enforcement can enforce. So nothing changes. I was willing to sign it. I did sign it. They thought I would never sign it, and when I signed it, they sent their top guys down and took away the part of law enforcement on the streets. I did it to be a good partner. They trained 100 of my deputies, and I really don't need the federal government. In fact, it's going to be great not to be under their umbrella, because then I don't have to worry about their bureaucratic policies and supervision. But I'm going to do the same thing. Nothing has changed.
In addition to the agreement with Sheriff Arpaio, ICE has signed 54 other new 287G agreements. 12 agreements await approval by the localities involved. Another 6 are in negotiation. 6 local jurisdictions opted out of the program altogether. Well, we now host a debate on these agreements. I'm joined in D.C. by Mark Krikorian, the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. They've just come out with a report this week arguing for the program's effectiveness. It's called the 287G program, Protecting Hometowns and Homeland. And we're joined from Los Angeles by Chris Newman, the legal director of the National Day Labor Organizing Network, one of the groups that's been at the forefront of the countrywide efforts to oppose the 287G program. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let's begin with Mark Krikorian. Why do you think 287G should remain?
Well, it's an extraordinarily important program in helping enforce the immigration laws. It leverages the relatively small number of federal officers by enabling the 700,000 local law enforcement officers all across the country who, in the normal course of their business, encounter significant numbers of illegal immigrants. And the way the program has worked has been very successful. Something like 1 out of 5 of all the criminal aliens, in other words, illegal aliens who've committed additional violent or drug crimes, 1 out of 5 that the Immigration Service has deported have come to light through this 287G program. It's also cost effective, and it enables local cops to do their local jobs, their local law enforcement, more effectively, because it gives them this additional tool to essentially partner with the feds so that the locals and the feds are both able to do their jobs more effectively.
Chris Newman, what's your problem with 287G?
Well, the 287G program is a wildly ineffective and dangerous experiment that was undertaken by the Bush administration at the end of its term. And it was responding to anti-immigrant hysteria, in no small part generated by groups like Mark's. And it essentially devolved immigration enforcement authority to actually a handful of local sheriffs like Joe Arpaio, mostly located in the deep south of the United States. And there are a number of problems with the program. Initially, it moves us further away from a national immigration policy that we need, and everyone agrees. I think that at this point, I'm sure Mark would agree as well, that we need federal immigration reform to come from Washington, D.C. The second thing is that it endangers local communities. Police are entrusted with making their communities safe, and to essentially devolve immigration enforcement authority to them not only diverts scarce resources away from other law enforcement goals, but it also makes victims of crime less willing to come forward and report and cooperate with the police, and it undermines 20 years of community policing gains made throughout the country. And the final problem with the program, again, as demonstrated by people like Sheriff Joe Arpaio and others like him in the South, is that the program has really resulted in massive racial profiling and a trampling of the civil rights of not just immigrants, but communities of color in their jurisdictions.
What about this issue of racial profiling, Mark Krikorian?
Well, this is really a red herring. I mean, look, nationwide, 80% of illegal immigrants are Latin American, and in a place like Phoenix, which is where this Sheriff Arpaio is from, it's more like 90 or 95%. The fact is that when illegal immigrants are arrested, almost all of them are going to be Hispanic. It's just the way the numbers are. It's not even a question of racial profiling. This is a red herring that opponents of the program are using to try to discredit it. And really, the bottom line is they don't want the immigration law to be enforced because they see an amnesty, a legalization program supposedly on the horizon, and nobody wants to be the last illegal alien deported before an amnesty. That's kind of what's driving this whole concern. And I have two problems with that. First of all, the law is the law, and if you want it changed, you work through the normal democratic process, and that just hasn't happened yet. And secondly, there isn't going to be any amnesty this year or next year or probably any time in President Obama's at least first term. And so the idea that we're on the cusp of changing the rules and let's hold off enforcement because that's coming right around the corner is simply false. There is not going to be any large-scale legalization program anytime soon.
I want to play another clip of the Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio talking to Fox News' Glenn Beck last week.
If local law enforcement comes across some people that have a erratic or scared or whatever, they're worried, yeah. And if they have their speech, what they look like, if they just look like they came from another country, we can take care of that situation. But I don't need that anyway, Glenn.
Wait. You tell me, hang on.
I can still do the job.
When was that law written? Because all I hear about is that sounds like profiling, and the government is saying you can't profile anybody.
Well, that law in 1996, part of the comprehensive law that was passed, it's in there. It's in there.
Chris Newman of the National Day Labor Organizing Network, your response.
Yeah, I think Mark's argument that this is a red herring issue, I mean, it is frankly laughable. Even Glenn Beck was incredulous when Joe Arpaio admitted on national television that he uses racial profiling. And to say that it's a red herring, I would ask Mark to talk to people like Julio and Julian Mora, a citizen and lawful permanent resident, respectively, in Maricopa County, who were arrested, detained, and humiliated by Sheriff Joe and his posse as part of one of these immigration sweeps. There has been demonstrable racial profiling. And look, the fact that only 55 jurisdictions have opted into this program, meaning that hundreds and even thousands of law enforcement partners have said, no thanks. Again, let's look at the list of sheriff's offices that have signed up. So you have people like Joe Arpaio, you have jurisdictions like Cobb County in Georgia, where there have been, again, reports of severe racial profiling. And the Los Angeles Times last week did a feature on some of the programs in North Carolina that came really ominously close to describing a situation that sounded a lot like Jim Crow, where people are being pulled over for listening to music too loud, and people are getting pulled over for broken taillights. And you know, so for Mark to say that there's no racial profiling is again, it's belied by the facts. And what it shows is, again, that Mark is willing to allow his sort of